All right, I'm going to check if it's live. Okay, I think we are officially live. Well, welcome back everyone to the FPL Script. This is episode 26 and the Gameweek 25, preview of the FPL 23-24 season. I'm your co-host FPL __Fran on X with my co-host at Schadenfreudist with a 1. And today we'll be discussing Game Week 25, but just briefly recapping on our Game Week 24 teams. I had a relatively good week. Obviously, I think within the analytics space, we've all basically had supercharged weeks as of late. You know, some people obviously maybe hurt a little bit. But for the most part, I think our median rank is absurd. I've been very fortunate to be benefiting from that. And I'm now at 835 in the world, got 83 points as well, conveniently, and decided to roll my free transfers. So despite obviously my team looking horrific, and that includes Eze and Colwell on the bench, I have 2 free transfers to sort of navigate this team. But you know, at the end of the day, Trent got injured, Gabriel did extremely well, but I definitely don't have as many Arsenal players as the rest of the analytics do. Dubravka continues to disappoint, and it's sort of a string of sort of really concerning, you know, almost form for Newcastle, which we can also see bearing out within their expected goals conceded as of late. Porro, of course, you know, someone that we really expect to only get attacking returns from, did not get attacking returns. Palmer did well, and I had a chance, of course, of going for Palmer to, well, not Palmer to Diaz, but rather Eze to Diaz, and I decided not to do so because I just thought Palmer had an equally good game week, and the EV really wasn't good enough for me to drop Palmer because I adjusted Palmer's minutes to 90 and still didn't really see any value for making that move. And then Foden, Richarlison, Saka, very standard template picks right now. With Darwin probably a little bit more lesser owned within the space, I think, generally speaking, with Watkins and then the Haaland captaincy. I was actually considering Darwin captaincy, but not very seriously. So it's not something where I was like sort of teetering back and forth with. I know some people did try the Darwin captaincy, and the expected values were extremely close. So I think obviously the outcome is extremely better, considering both players got really good minutes and probably, you know, overplayed our expectations in terms of minutes. But happy to have landed the right side on captaincy and still get a Darwin goal, you know, as a result. What about
Yeah,
you?
I also had a great week. At 1 past 11 on Saturday, 1 minute after the deadline, I received news that Allison was apparently ill, and he was my transfer in this week for Dubravka. So I had actually charged the week. So I just thought this is not going to get better from here because I just lost any chance of covering the Liverpool clean sheet, and this was the most prime fixture, right, for a clean sheet perspective, from a clean sheet perspective. So I thought, okay, this is going to be one of those weeks. I even asked review on the timeline that how my ranks will be affected, as in my
I
massive
saw, I
data
saw.
ranks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and review told me that basically my real minutes rank is done, because I'm going to get Areola, and my xMins rank should be okay because I did get 4.1 EV from Allison. So looks like Allison is okay now. He
Yeah,
is back
he's
in
in
training,
training.
which
Yeah.
is and if you remember what I said to you last week offline, that Allison is the biggest troll in FPL. He does that every season, and despite all of my misgivings, all of my grassy misgivings, I did bring him in, and I suffered as a consequence. But it's okay. I needed a player who I could bench easily for 26, and Allison was the only keeper I could go for, or the only Liverpool defender I could go for. Pinnock clean sheet was great. I don't know how he got that clean sheet. I think it was a fair bit of luck because Brentford conceded more than 1.5 xg
Yeah.
in that game, if I recall correctly. So slightly fortuitous with the clean sheet, and everything else was kind of similar to your team. I reckon. I think the Jota goal was the only sort of differentiating factor because I think you had Richarlison instead of Jota, and Darwin scored 2 more points than Solanke. But Solanke also got 4 points, which kind of made my decision to not take him out for a hit.
Yeah, it worked out really well.
Reasonable.
A lot of people even took hits for like Solanke to
Exactly.
Darwin. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm glad it worked out like that. Although this week I'm taking the same hit, doing Solanke to Darwin, but it's okay. Now it's Newcastle away, so
Yeah.
I at least can say that it's a EV positive move. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've all sort of done well. I just wanted to shout out Andy Martins in the chat, along with the the
Oh,
artist formerly known as MD1, Priyansh as well, and a couple other esteemed guests who are frequenters of the channel. So welcome. I really enjoyed the Sir Talp and Andy Martin crossover episode. That was really good. So if anyone has time to watch FPL Optimized, do feel free to give that episode a watch. It also
Yeah,
includes a very good porridge recipe at the end, but I won't spoil it. So
yeah,
do enjoy that. Moving on though, we actually have plans of talking about chip strategy. And of course, we do take an analytics approach to chip strategy. Maybe myself not so much because I have some plans in mind that are a little bit out of left field. But in general, of course, we've been talking about chip strategy, and I do think that a couple lines are converging for all of us managers, and it's not necessarily just because of the expected value, but more so because they feel intuitive because of certain game weeks where we get information, or certain game weeks where clearly for a lot of teams there are certain road stops, right? So I thought it would be useful to actually go through and list out all the possible wildcards, loosely, because I think they have a different theme to them. But I have clubbed together wildcard 27 and wildcard 28 because I feel that they are quite similar in nature.
yeah, yeah.
So let's just start with wildcard 31. I mean, this is, I think, the what I would call the sort of meta free hit or the meta strategy right now in terms of chips. I think this is something that Ben himself outlined would be his line of choice. Right now based on the current information. Obviously, we are yet to get some blank game week information on game week 27 when we actually get the updated understanding and crystallization of game week 29. But this strategy, of course, I think it's still flexible personally on free at 29 and 34. But it is one window where you basically get the full sort of landscape of FPL. Although of course this does come after your ability to navigate blank game week 29, depending on how you plan to sort of make your transfers from this point onwards until wildcard 31, and that still leaves you with navigating 34 and 37. But I think also it's much closer to 37. So I guess you could also argue that it does make for planning, let's say, the bench boost at the back end of the season just a little bit easier as well. And it's almost like a very balanced approach, I would say, as opposed to targeting anything sort of with a little bit of rigor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wildcard 31 is also my current plan because it dead ends into blank game week 29, sort of. I know it's not exactly dead ending into 29, but you get over the final international break and also the blank game week, and then you're left with tackling just the last part of the season, which is 31 to 38. Although the later you uh, sort of push your wild card, I think there's a chance that get of course we get more information, but also you get less game weeks for the wildcard to actually affect your massive data rank and your actual points as well. So 31 I think is sort of the upper limit, I would say, for wildcarding. We will come to wildcard 26 because of course Fran has some plans, and because I haven't given it even a remotely even given it a thought, I am not even going to talk anything about 26 except to hear his thoughts, and then maybe I have some sort of opinion. So 31 right now is in on the cards for me. I'll run some solves tomorrow after the press conferences. I suspect 31 should still come out on top because as we'll come to bench boost as well. I have just stopped applying bench boost to any of the strategies. I'm just evaluating all strategies by only selecting free hit and wildcard. Those are the only two chips that I'm applying. And of course, triple captaincy, I'm assuming, is going to be played next week or the coming week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, should we jump into wildcard 26, or let's
Yeah.
just save it for the end? I think.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
leave it for the end. So yeah, 27, 28 was my initial plan, just to
Yeah.
continue along the same veins. 27 was my initial plan, but after understanding, okay, so you do get some sort of EV boost in 28 because you play three Bournemouth and three Luton players, and if luck is on your side, maybe Leicester beats Bournemouth and Brighton beats Wolves, and you do get the Bournemouth game in 29 as well. So there's less risk of bench boosting in that game week, but I still think it is pretty dire in terms of the overall team that you have, because I did run a lot of solves for wildcard 27 bench boost 28, and all of them, not there's not a single exception to this, all of them had less EV in 29 than if you did not use a single chip, and also a couple of game weeks around it. So of course overall points are more because you apply the bench boost to your team, but I think you are losing a lot of EV in game weeks around blank game week 29, as well as I think this week and the next week. So it's a really weird sort of time to wildcard. I think the only benefit is the fixtures. for blank game week 29, right? What are your thoughts?
Um, so I think I spoke to Priyaash about it, and he mentioned, of course,
Yeah.
he preferred wildcard 28 because there's like almost a half ability to dead end on wildcard 27 with Arsenal,
Okay.
technically. And another thing too, I think when you discuss like wildcard 27, 28 is it probably still applies to most managers who have quite a spoiled team. Like if you've been riddled with injuries, and of course in the short term you've been trying to manage and capitalize on the upside of, let's say, double gaming 25 and navigating around Liverpool and City picks, you probably actually have, you know, a pretty bad bench as well that you're carrying through that might not be suitable for the sort of landscape of 26 to 29. So I guess, you know, if you're planning for wildcard 27, 28, it's a bit more convenient. I don't think there's a natural dead end really. Like, let's be honest, like wildcard 20, like
Yeah.
gaming 26 isn't some sort of dead end spot. So I think you lose the value of that. But then I think, yeah, if your team is generally struggling a bit, you can navigate, of course, like the current landscape quite well. Um, and yeah, I mean, I still think that you're flexible once again in free hits. So whatever you plan, you'll have more information than, of course, a wildcard 26, which of course I'll talk about in a moment. But I think that way you'll just basically be able to navigate perfectly. And let's say if your team has already been sort of spoiled for EV, as you said, you manage 28. But I think the overarching point that I would say is that a lot of people who have even sort of remotely considered bench boost 28, I think, are now quite against the idea. And I kind of
Hmm.
understand because of Spurs. Well, you mentioned it really. It's Spurs versus Villa,
Yeah.
and
Of
I,
Villa.
I think
Yeah.
you basically will be riding out, let's say, a Villa asset on the bench, and it's not perfect. So it's not exactly the nicest bench boost. I think playing the season, I probably have had multiple weeks where I have a competing bench, and I think the other thing too
Yeah.
is your keepers are pit against each other. So it kind of feels like fake expected value to me sometimes. I always say this, but I know Fogel got like the perfect mirror matchup of goalkeepers where, you know, Ramsdale keeps a clean sheet and then Ben Foster you know, does a
Oh, saves a
does a
penalty or
penalty
something?
save,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
miracle, right? But you
Yeah.
know, I don't think it lines up nearly as nicely as you'd think, and it is a very sort of, yeah, lame bench boost in my opinion. So
Oh,
I
it
would
is. It
still
is.
plan for a bench
Yeah.
boost 37. I just think this is for the type of manager who thinks that their team has, you know, just unfortunately taken a lot of unnecessary damage as of late due to injuries and so on and so forth. And then the last play is going to be free at 29, wildcard 35. Now you've mentioned already that you think it's too late, and I
Hmm.
think a lot of our teams are spoiled from being able to sort of go with such a patient approach and such a calculated approach. I find it almost impossible. And I'm sure that there are some teams in the world that for whatever reason have not been carrying injuries. Let's say you don't carry Trent. Let's say you don't have a Konsa injury of some sort. You might even already own Pau, and you're, you know, a couple steps ahead of the field. Let's say you own Douglas Luiz as well. So even though I think the ironic part of the strategy is you're planning for a free at 29 as well, because in theory, of course, you're sandwiching, you know, the wildcard 35 by allowing yourself to dead end on 34. Yeah, I think this strategy just it really only works for managers where I think if you're running solves now with inverted decay and somehow wildcard 35 is showing up well, it probably actually means that you're one of the few managers in the world who can probably benefit from the strategy quite well. And I don't think many of us are in that path. So that's my only thought to it. I think if you don't see any issues with your team, like this is something serious to consider, but it's most likely the case that you won't.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. So I think you and I are in similar situations.
Mm,
Yours might be a little more
yeah,
urgent in terms of when to wildcard, but I am not that far behind because I still own Eze, I own Livramento, so my team
right.
is not looking that good. So for us, I think wildcarding, we are open to wildcarding, sooner rather than later. But for people who have none of these issues because they wildcarded late, let's say 19 or game week 20, I can understand why they want to wildcard in 35 because there is no pressing issue in the
Yeah,
team. Everything
exactly.
seems good, everything is set up well. Maybe you have to take a couple of hits, which I think everyone is probably going to be taking if you're not going to be playing any chips. So, from that point of view, I do understand because you don't want to waste your wildcard, but also at the same time, I feel like in order to take full advantage of expected value on the table, we do need to time it a little better.
I think so. I think a good example with my team is this, right? Like, let's say after the Trent injury, I believe within the short term, I immediately already lost, like, let's say probably around 6 EV within
Yeah,
the first 2 weeks, game weeks
yeah,
25 and 26, and that's also what is sort of pushing me towards a wild card, because it's like I know I'm ceding so much EV to the field and to what my team could potentially give me with the 2 free transfers that I have. I might as well dead end and get the same EV that I was losing with Trent, and then fix my team in such a manner than, let's say, wildcarding later, taking maybe
yeah.
an abundance of hits on 26 and then pretending like nothing's happened, and I'm happy to navigate the rest of the landscape. I just think it's more likely that I might as well guarantee the short-term value that I have from my players, and if my team is in a calamitous state, which it is, then why not?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a good time to go to your Wildcard 2016. So you can walk us through your thoughts and what you're planning to do right now.
Yeah. So I am basically go to wildcard 26. I think I'm 95% there. I'd say the other 5% is waiting if, let's say, there's a Poro injury, because that would just make it 100%. The only other situation in the world where I don't wildcard 26 is where I think, I don't know, let's say I'm a little bit perturbed by the idea of, playing without the lack of information of 27 and beyond. And I decide to suddenly go Virgil from Trent, and then I go either Odegaard or Bruno, depending on whether I plan for a free at 29 or 34,
Hmm.
vaguely, I would say. So that's sort of my rough plan. But yeah, I think I'll be dead ending instead. I think I've got a position where I have 2 free transfers. I might as well make my team a free hit, on Gaming 25, and then I have the opportunity to reset my team. Because right now I have these issues, right? Let's say I think for me, a Virgil transfer is guaranteed for Trent. I just think that Virgil with these 2 fixtures is too good to ignore. So I'm always going to make that transfer to Virgil. So that obviously leaves me with an additional player that's going to be a blank gaming 26er. On top of that, I've got Colwell, Poro, Richarlison, and Palmer. That's 4 players. And then I've got, of course, Darwin up top as well. Not to mention that, yeah, I mean, 1 free transfer for, let's say, Odegaard or Fernandez probably isn't going to change the look of my Gaming 26 team. I'm probably going to have to take a -8 or -12 at the bare minimum. And I might even be incentivized to go Saliba, for example, as well. So
Hmm.
probably, yeah, that's around 14, 16 points like lost to the field. I don't want to lose 16 points. So I'm going to be wildcard on 26. And so the 2 options that I have now, and these are not set in stone. So these are solves that are based on me running binary fixtures. So my
Hmm.
assumption here is that Luton versus Nottingham Forest will still be a
Not so
fixture,
far. Yeah,
a real
yeah.
fixture. So it kind of allows me, of course, to maybe overinvest into Bournemouth. But although what's interesting here is you can see that actually there's not too much value to Bournemouth anyways, even by me doing so. And I'll talk about, of course, the upsets in the chat later on. But free at 29, this is, once again, with the binary solves. Um, the assumption here, of course, is that you just basically take the chance to go into Wolves and Man United assets. As you can see, there's 2 Wolves assets here. It's Ait Nuri and Hee Chan. I have a preference for Ait Nuri, so I've adjusted his minutes. People might not feel the same, and that's totally fine. I've also adjusted Garnacho and Hee Chan's minutes because I think, first of all, I just think Garnacho is simply first choice. He's probably nailed on to play 89 minutes a game. So in close to Palmer territory, I would say right now with Chelsea. So I think that's sort of the position that Garnacho's in, and I really like taking that punt. Fernandes, of course, is a questionable pick. We have talked about the decline of his XG, and I think right now this is probably the first season you can genuinely see like a gulf in his XG. So I mean, whether I still go with Fernandes is another pick. I'm just showing you the solve. As you can see, though, the locked players here are Saka, Hee-Chan, and Son. Solanke, Haaland, and Watkins. Those are nailed as well. Pedro
And do you
Porro,
want
this
to
is...
read your team for the podcast listeners?
Oh, yes, sorry, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, need help, of course. Neto Raya, goalkeepers. Gabriel Aitnuri, Senesi, Pau, Pedro Porro. This is pre-injury solve. Free at 29. And then the midfield, Saka, Hee-Chan, Garnacho, Bruno Fernandes, Son. Front line of Solanke, Haaland, and Watkins. And then on top of that, we have a sort of competitive solve, which is like free, or competing solve rather, which is free at 34. Neto and Flecken, Gabriel, Pau, Saliba, Doughty, Pedro Porro as your defenders. Saka, Hee-Chan, and Son once again. So the same sort of midfielders, but then actually Bowen, Douglas Luiz, and then Watkins, Solanke, and Haaland, same forwards. So yeah, structurally, of course, you can see that it's just, catering towards, Brentford, West Ham, and Aston Villa, because they are sort of certain players for Gimme
Hmm.
29. And these are solves that I've made, you know, with no gambles basically in place, right? I
Not
am
yeah.
expecting blanks. I'm expecting no upsets, and therefore this is the team. But of course, and as you know, people rightly mentioned in chat, particularly Andy Martin, of course, like teams like Leeds, Leicester, etc., like they are in quite a bit of form. If you want
Even
to put it,
Blackburn, if I'm being honest, like
yeah,
Blackburn, Newcastle
yeah,
could
because
easily
the
change
odds
teams.
exactly the odds for Newcastle have
Yeah,
dropped as well. But part of that too is because Newcastle just look like a hot steaming pile of you know what,
yeah.
and that's been interesting, right? In terms of seeing the odds move, and I think we've now seen a slight sort of, well, I think we've seen a general sort of decrease in terms of the amount of expected blanks. But yeah, I still think that the upset, of course, that's most likely to happen is going to be the one centered on Nottingham Forest. And it's not even really an upset, is it? So it's more so the case that I expect that game to happen with Luton. And so I've assumed that with the solves here. But I think when I wildcard, I will actually take some gambles. But I think generally seeing here, what you can see with the review is that there's a preference, of course, to prioritize Wolves and Man United if you go for a free at 29 approach. It also kind of allows me to keep triple Arsenal, which is something that I quite like. Because intuitively, I think I want to be keeping triple Arsenal, and I like the idea here that it feels a bit safe to keep triple Arsenal. And then what I like about a free at 29 approach is, let's say those kind of upsets actually do happen, then I would just not plan a free at 29 at all. I think my team would be completely ready for free at like for to play 29, and then I can kind of punt on United for free almost. So I kind of like this strategy. And free at 34, of course, is just sort of gearing towards, once again, the exact same fixtures that I've outlined, but then, you know, it still actually interestingly has triple Arsenal, which you can clearly see review already has a huge preference for Arsenal. And part of that, I think, is because Arsenal players are overwhelmingly efficient, and there's no reason to ignore Arsenal players up until basically they just fully blank.
Yeah,
It's got Doughty
yeah.
here, which I think is the one change with Senesi, but structurally not a huge difference. And then you kind of look into players like Bowen and Douglas Luiz, and I've seen that Bowen, of course, is can be swapped around with Odegaard, but of course that just means you lose Saliba. But that's pretty much it. I think the question I suppose some people will ask is, you know, what happens to players like Richarlison and Palmer? These players actually come into my team eventually through, you know, progressive transfers. So those players will come in. I think that the overarching questions though for people who are, you know, with the teams that they currently have, you know, persisting is, what do you do with Man City? You know, there's no Man City in these solves.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you can see obviously no Man City defender, no Foden, and on top of that as well, generally speaking, of course, no Liverpool. Now, I'm not so worried about, let's say, the lack of Liverpool, because I think that most of the Liverpool players that we've picked, I probably don't necessarily want to own going forwards. Like Robertson, for example, is not a player that I think will guarantee perfect minutes going forward. So maybe he's a player that I don't want to necessarily pick.
I,
Um,
I had a question for you. So, what have
yeah.
you set Salah's minutes at right now in this solve, for example?
So Salah's minutes are exactly as they are in review, right? I think it's like perfect minutes basically after gaming 25.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
fair enough.
So
Yeah.
I think Salah actually comes up in gaming 30. So it's like this is almost rerunning a natural route where I think a lot of people are planning Holland out, you know, around gaming 28, and then you just go either Adebayo or you go Holland to Tony on gaming 29, and then you go Salah on gaming 30. So that's the
Hmm.
general sort of line that I think I would play. Of course, there might be some lines where I just persist with Holland and see how the team sort of unfolds. This is eight attackers, of course, keep in mind. And this is very insulated. So no gambles, of course, being taken for FA Cup sort of upsets. But I just wanted to show, for example, what the worst wildcard would be. This is the most safest. Well, these are the safest wildcards that I can really effectively build.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah,
So I would suggest one thing. I don't know how much time you have,
yeah,
but as I keep suggesting to people who want to deal with uncertainty, you can do some sort of permutations and at least maybe fix the spine of your squad.
yeah,
So let's say you fix binary fixtures as Blackburn winning, which means that Newcastle have a game in 29,
yeah,
and let's say Forest winning against United. I know that there are too many permutations, but all I'm saying is if you can narrow down, let's say, three or four of the likeliest scenarios, I think we can use FPL Spaceman's graphics to narrow down maybe the three or four most likely scenarios. And once you have that, if you can just run solves based on those scenarios and aggregate the results and see which players are common in those drafts, that at least ensures that you have the same spine regardless of which sort of path you take. But the punts you take, if there's one or two punts, you can easily bench them, right? Let's say the worst result happens and you decide to free it in 34. It's still not the end of the world. You can easily transfer them out or bench them. I know you lose some EV because you will have other moves planned during that time, but I don't think it's as bad as people think. Although if every single upset happens, which is not that unlikely given that what happened last season with Southampton and Spurs both losing in the respective games. I don't know. It's really uncertain in those terms, but I also think it's not that bad because what forced you to wildcard, I think, is also the Trent injury now, right? Because that forces you to make transfers you would have
Yeah.
otherwise not made, and your team in 26 is essentially not great. So
That's the thing, yeah.
that's
Like I am
primarily the
basically creating a monster team for 25 and 26
yeah,
through this wild
yeah,
card, and I'm sure I'll
yeah.
lose points to the field because, as I said, I lack information. But I will be taking some gambles with my own sort of later
Yes,
wild
yeah.
card. The idea that I wanted to go with though is generally just to run a free at 29 draft and probably play along those lines because, of course, if I'm planning for a free at 29 and the upsets happen, the reality, of course, is I don't need a free at 29 at all.
Yes, yes.
So what I like about running a free at 29 solve is like by ignoring free at 29 entirely, it's almost showing me a team that I would actually like to go with if upsets happen as well. Like I almost like to think about it like that because of course the way the
Oh,
upsets
that's a
will
fair
happen
point.
is that it'll sort of reverse
Hmm.
engineer free at 34 in
Hmm.
the way that free at 29 would unfold. And so by planning so closely towards the free at 29 approach, I think that that's better than let's say if I was planning 3 at 34 with some upsets baked in for free at 29. I'll also mention that I think Spaceman might be releasing a graphic soon that shows you what happens if certain free at 29 variations come about, or rather,
Oh, for
blank game
34
week
and
permutations
27.
come about.
Yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah,
that's really illustrative. I think if you are a crazy sort of analytics manager and you want to update your fixtures, do look out for the content that I think Spaceman is going to drop soon on that, because that should be perfect if you're super into that. But this is, of course, for people like me who are going to wildcard 26 early and will have to look into these probabilities. Otherwise, of course, you just play FPL, I think, pretty flexibly right now until 27 comes about. And then you make much more sort of targeted moves from 27 onwards. So that's my general
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Also, on the point of Fernandes and Odegaard, it really makes sense for people who also don't plan on wildcarding in 26 because I just think that with Odegaard, fine. I guess Odegaard's chances of playing in 29 are even less than Fernandes, even though I think both are likely not to play. United do have good short-term fixtures, and also his role. I know we've spoken about Fernandes previously, uh, and I think it's been much better since that time when we've had most of our players back.
Yeah.
I know that Shaw is probably going to make it for this week, for based on what Ten Hag
Oh,
has
I'll
said.
mention that Dallo might actually appear,
Yeah,
on a
Dallo,
solve.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, because I'm assuming you're setting his minutes at 90, right? Because there's no
I
way
am.
he's
Yeah.
not going to play even a single game now. He's just going to keep playing 90s every single game,
Yeah.
and
Correct.
also Maguire for the foreseeable future. So for people that don't have money, I think Maguire could also be a pretty good option.
Yeah.
Although I can understand people's aversion when it comes to United assets because it's not been a good start or a good 23 weeks at least.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think this will be a nice week as well to sort of reconsider like Richarlison's position in my draft. And obviously Porro might fade away as well. So there will be some sort of cost savings there. He could end up being Dallo, I guess, as
yeah.
well. And I might very well have Richarlison in the squad. And for example,
Hmm.
that would probably make me feel a little bit more encouraged about not having Bruno. But we'll see. This is roughly it. Another thing too, I think that to think about too is when we get Game Week 37 on the solver, that's when I can rerun these solves and run bench boost 37, which is the thing that I'm most keen about.
Hmm.
Because I'll be able to see whether I rather plan for the short term with a goalkeeper or I'm holding someone like, I guess, Leno for the long distant double gaming 37, which reminds me, of course, of some of the managers who have held Flecken all this time. And congratulations, of course, on the Wolves clean sheet. But yeah, he's been pretty dismaying, right? So I'll need to think about that and like whether I want to prioritize short term, long term in terms of goalkeepers and things like that. Just to respond quickly to Priyansh's question,
Yeah.
because yeah,
The
I think
irony here is that all Flecken owners benched him, and I got the Pinnock list. So
and you got the
that's
Pinnock, yeah,
kind of
because
sad.
because that's perfect management.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
Well, I think that's it
yeah,
for Wildcard 26. I think it's just the idea that, obviously all teams are different, but I think the beauty of using like something like review is that you can kind of find variations of sort of chip strategy ideas through, using the solver to come up with something that might be unique to yourself. As I said, not many people will be running Wildcard 26 with me. It's a huge gamble. A gamble I'm also willing to take, but I'm happy to do so, and my team needs it, in my opinion. And It's not that I want to, like, for example, maximize my rank for Game Week 30 and post a screenshot of my live rank. I'm going to be going with a lot of picks that are going to be against the field. It might be the case that Foden, Jota, these sorts of picks that continue doing well. But it's just, I mean, we take an expected value approach, and I've got expected value here, so I will grab that. And yeah, and
Absolutely.
I've gone with a lot of players that I think here, even within these solves, that you will find are only come about through X minutes adjustments, and that's something that I will always continue to do as a manager. So yeah,
Fair enough.
all right. Sort of the sort of bread and butter of the episode as well is sort of discussing, game week 25 and of course the doubles that we have in place. It is of course just Man City and Liverpool. I would say primarily speaking, like I don't particularly care, I suppose, about Luton players too much outside of Doughty. Not really too worried about Kaminsky, and then with Brentford, of course, it's Tony and Flecken. A lot of people have been talking about Reguilon, but I have to be honest and say, like, I think he's got no value this week. So if you like Reguilon in general because he plugs in holes within your team in Game 26 and Game 29, bring him in on Game 26, but don't be bringing him in Game 25 because you think he's got a double. Because I think, yeah, I mean, especially for us taking expected value approach, the expected value of these doubles is almost as good as, for example, playing Sheffield United away. In fact, it's probably worse, right? So
Yeah.
this is a really bad fixture for Brentford, or set of fixtures rather. And I wouldn't be investing into players from like Reguilon, but instead this is an opportunity to continue to seek, I think, value from City and Liverpool because you can guarantee it. And how often do you get two good fixtures really for Man City and Liverpool? To be honest, not very often. So we still have a few players, I would say, between Man City and Liverpool that have a lot of good value for us. For me, of course, with Man City, the Guardiola injury does change things. I think probably people should be considering more towards, I guess, Diaz and Ake. Um, Maybe historically these two players would have been preferred before, let's say, Walker sprung out like something like, I don't know, 18 90s in a row. Those sorts of players. And then, of course, you have the question mark around KDB as well, which I think could be prompted by some pretty aggressive transfers like Bradley. But then with Liverpool, ultimately, I think Virgil van Dijk, we want to talk about him as well. So um, Virgil van Dijk
I was
is,
just looking
yeah,
at I was just looking at Reguilon's minutes on review,
yeah, it is
and
a bit
I
low.
think that the decay is still kind to Reguilon, given
Yeah,
the fact that he has such a bad injury
injury
record.
history. Yeah,
Absolutely, because even when he was at United, I got to see it firsthand how bad
he got
of an
injured twice,
injury
right?
history he has. Yes,
Yeah,
and he barely played any games. Although I don't know how much Tena would have actually used him because we realized pretty soon into the season that Reguilon and Amrabat are just not cut out for the Premier League. And I guess Spurs also realized that that's why they keep loaning him out. So even though I think there was a couple of weeks where they did miss him because Udogi was out and they didn't have
well, they
a
had to
proper
play
replacement.
Davies, Emerson at times. Yeah,
Davies on that side exactly. So maybe for those couple of weeks they might have done well with him, but other than that, you are absolutely right. Also, I've been pointing this out for many weeks. Ethan Pinnock, I am currently playing him this week, but he has an expected value of 3.3, and Cole Palmer against Man City away has an expected value of 3.2 in a single week, and that's also with I think 100% MD. And
mm-hmm.
when I switch it out to, let's say, 60% MD, 40% market odds, Palmer's EV does drop because markets are absolutely not favoring Chelsea to do
Of
well in
course.
this
Yeah,
fixture.
it's Chelsea away versus a
So
good team.
exactly,
Yeah,
and Pinnock's EV I think becomes 3.4. So right now I'm just about playing Pinnock over Palmer, but come deadline I might change my mind because also, as you said, it's so bad. Those fixtures are so bad. There
I
is no
can't.
hope.
I
Is there?
generally
There is
can't.
just no hope. And you know
Yeah,
what happened? So I've been watching every single Brentford game
yeah,
when I can, obviously.
yeah.
Uh, Looking at every single set piece that they have, thinking, oh, Pinnock scored against Chelsea. That was his last goal in the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
When Mbumo scored those two goals against, obviously, Diaby uh, in game week 11, I think, was it, or game week 10. So after that, he has not scored a single goal, nor has he, I think, registered even a single attempt on goal, I think, from
I
corners.
think
So
he had
it's
a good
been
long distance shot. Okay, yeah, from corners. Yeah,
no
but
from
yeah,
corners. Yeah, that was the main point. So he
no,
has
of
been
course. Yeah,
there is his presence has been devoid of threat completely. So I don't even have hope from that point of view. And so does the review. I think review also has no hope for Pinnock in this double game week. So yeah, sorry. Coming back to Van Dijk,
nah,
who
yeah.
definitely has better EV.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Liverpool, the interesting thing, of course, is I mentioned how if you want to hit certain breakpoints like a KDB, like you probably have to sacrifice some of the guarantees that you'd actually naturally get in a double game week,
Yeah.
and that means you have to be punting towards players like I don't know Konate, Bradley, etc. Probably Gomez, who I wouldn't advise. But yeah, like Bradley's probably the most appealing because he's the cheapest, and of course, like people have seen, of course, Bradley absolutely ball out, which is like totally fine. So you're looking at someone who probably is the cheapest Liverpool player that's probably confirmed to actually start one game, which I think is very good value. But of course, it does mean that you're enhancing another sort of double gaming 26 player within your team. De Bruyne though is an interesting one because I think the question mark, of course, is whether he gets two starts. I don't know where you
Mm.
sit on that. And so of course like he can be subbed off early, but these are big games for City, I would say,
Mm.
which is a little bit different to for example, when let's say they play Burnley, and I do think you can generally say they sort of put out a weaker team versus Burnley. It's not necessarily the case that I think that Man City would do the same here. So I think two KDB starts is probably very likely this week, in my opinion,
Would you
and
still
we'll have
put
to
his
manage that.
xMins above 130, let's say? 130.
Yeah, I'd probably put them at like 150,
Uh,
150. Yeah.
one 150 is like one whole game and then a 60-minute sub, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or 275s or something like that.
Yeah,
Two
exactly. Yeah.
180, 170 or something like that. I think for the double game week, the biggest point is to have an X-minutes discussion, which is what we had planned.
Yeah.
But also, it's really difficult to read anything into the Champions League game because, as Luke has pointed out rightly, people thinking that their player is benched in the Champions League game means that he'll start two games.
That's
It
not
doesn't really
it's not
hold
guaranteed
true.
at all. Like this is a manager
Exactly.
who loves, like, he's played people for 90 minutes, like
Like
just 11
momentum, like
players. Yeah,
yeah,
momentum.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing,
So
of course, is how do injuries like change certain things? Because I think Bernardo has a knock, but I think that's something
he
that should be
should be
fine.
fine, I
He should be
think.
fine. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And then
But
Grealish, of course, has something muscular, which is, I know a
good
lot
for
of people
Foden speed, I
immediately
think.
think to Doku, but I mean, like we've seen games already where Doku
Mm,
doesn't play, so I don't like Doku,
yeah.
for example, from a City point of view. And also another thing too is like if you're investing to a City player, you like investing to a City player because you think that they'll play with really good minutes like going forwards,
Yes,
right? And it's very
yes.
unlikely that someone like Doku will have good minutes going forwards.
No.
That's just the reality. So that's why I think
One thing
it's
I've
tough.
noticed is review recommends you Doku
Hmm.
when it gets to the absolute end of its wits. So it's almost on the verge of suggesting single gaming options is when it starts suggesting players
Mm.
like Doku because obviously there's still more expected value in double gaming player even if he let's say plays
Right.
100 minutes or let's say 90 minutes is a bit weird but more than 90 minutes. So I completely get that about Doku. I think defenders are the main concern, and as you pointed out, if you own Kyle Walker, you should play him. He's most
You have
likely
to
going
play
to
him.
get two
You
starts.
have to play him. Yeah.
Most likely. I still don't know what happens if Akanji comes in. Where does he play? People are suggesting he plays left back or something.
Well, it's Stones as
Um,
well, isn't it? Like he's gonna
Stones
add
as
some
well.
issues. Yeah.
Exactly. So from that perspective, of course, no one is going to go Stones because of the injury record as well. And Pep is always trying to manage him as much as he can, although that also seems to not be working. He still continues to keep getting injured. So I'm really skeptical about any City defenders except for Ake and Kyle Walker. I would not go for anyone else.
Not even
And
Diaz.
from, do you think Diaz starts twice?
I think it's probable.
What?
But yeah, I
Uh,
mean, it's a good point on
yeah.
Akanji. I mean, I think we've seen before, like let's say when Diaz sometimes has those like absolute stinkers of a game in terms
Hmm.
of being able to sort of pass out of the back like quickly and efficiently. Like we have seen some pretty weird benchings. Um,
I think it was against Leipzig, if I'm not wrong, because they put two balls over the top and Openda scored twice. And
yeah.
people were expecting that after that game, Diaz would be benched, but he still played the next game
Yeah,
because
but I
he
mean,
was,
there's been, for example, let's say after one of the international breaks, I think like game week 11, I think he was benched, for example, for one of those fixtures. But it was also because he was coming off a really poor game.
yeah,
It's more
he
about like
was, he was.
what tools like does Diaz bring to the squad. I think like yeah, like Pep's not someone who's super fussed about someone losing their like defensive duels, but it's more so like
Hmm.
yeah, if I need you to actually distribute properly and play fast with
Mm.
momentum, like,
Ball
can you
progression,
do it?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
it has happened before, but I still think Ruben Dias will be fine. Um, yeah, I guess for me it's just about Liverpool. Like, do you think Bradley will get 2 starts, or do you think anyone that's not Roger van Dijk will guarantees two
No,
starts? I generally don't think
I
so.
agree.
I know some people
No,
like
no.
Konate. Um, yeah,
Yeah, Konate seems better compared to, let's say, 2 weeks ago or even last week, because now that Trent is no longer an option.
hmm,
If you think Bradley is not going to play twice, it means that Gomez has to play there.
yeah,
If Joe Gomez is playing there, that rules out one player who could potentially play centre back.
yeah.
And
But they do have
if you also
Kwanzaa.
think Robertson, exactly,
Yeah,
Kwanzaa is the player only one who could compete for that spot, and he has been playing well, I guess, especially against weaker teams.
yeah.
So, for example, against Burnley, I think he was perfectly fine, and that could easily happen against Luton. But also, I don't know how Klopp is going to handle those two games, because there's a FA Cup, Carabao Cup final at the end, or EFL Cup final. Because normally, if there weren't a final, I think we would pretty much have a handle on who is going to
I
play
think so.
twice.
I agree. Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
main
So
concern because it feels like Luton can be where you sort of play like a BS team. Um,
yes.
and that's my concern about Bradley coming on in that second game. But he's probably going to play minutes in that game too. So it's not like, oh, I think Bradley will play like,
120,
90 and
120, I
0.
think.
It's possible
Yep.
that he can play extra minutes. And he has played
Yeah.
incredibly well.
Mm.
Yeah.
But also, if you, let's say, transfer in Bradley, you need to also be aware of your wildcard plans, right? So if you're wildcarding in 27, fine, you don't care. But if you don't wildcard in 27 and everyone comes back,
Hmm.
so his minutes are not going to be steady for you to play him every week.
Yeah.
So
Well, he
that
would be a
means that
4.1 player. So I guess you would have to look
you can
at
just
him
bench
as a
him.
dead spot.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
also you lose a Liverpool spot. So if you want to triple up, which I don't think people will,
Which
because
is
they
hard to
also
do.
blank in 29.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I do understand that. But I'm just saying you need to consider all of that, because for someone who might be listening to this, they might feel like we are being really uncertain or unsure about things. But that's what the reality is. It's really difficult to put all of these things into, let's say, your mental model when it comes to X minutes, and come up with a good enough answer for these players, except for Van Dijk. Because I do genuinely believe that Van Dijk is the only Liverpool defender, bar Allison, if you consider goalkeepers and defenders,
Yep.
who are likely to play in all three games. Because we are also thinking about the
I
EFL Cup
think
final.
like historically, whenever we see like a midweek game for Liverpool, and let's say all the games are important, we have seen key players get rested for that midweek game. Like I think last season, what was a good example of that was when Gakpo actually felt like he was extremely informed for a moment, and we had this double game
Mm,
week. And even Robertson, for example, of course, has been a long-standing important player for the team. Like both those players were rested for the midweek game, and this happens, right? Tsimikas is back, and of course, well, I'm not saying Gakpo
yes.
is important now, but of course, any of the players that you want to be punting on into, like let's say Jota and Diaz, could very well lose like significant minutes versus Luton, and
Yeah.
that's life. Like that's like Liverpool are a team that rotate also from like a sports science basis as well. They're less so like Pep, where I think Pep could actually field like one team like a suicide squad for like three games straight, and
Yeah.
the core of those players like play 89 minutes. Like that does happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are my sort
Oh,
of thoughts
also,
on
I made a
Liverpool.
mistake. I think Allison is not likely to play the final, because I think it's going to be Keller who
Hmm.
plays. But
Yeah.
so
Well,
you're
which would be
left with,
nicer for him, I guess, in the short term.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But Virgil, I think, is the only one. Also, as you already pointed out, Robertson, I read in the chat someone talking about Simicas.
Mm.
So Simicas is realistically an option now, because he did come off the bench against Burnley. So it does seem like he has built up fitness. So I would hesitate to go for Robertson. But also, if you already own Van Dijk and you want triple Liverpool, would you bring in Darwin? So you already talked about Diaz and Jota, right? So what do you think differently about Darwin?
I do. I do. I still think that he probably has better minutes than Jota and Diaz. But I'm happy to be
Yeah,
wrong about that. I just think that CF spot is probably still destined to be his. I know, of course, he was benched in Arsenal, so it's very clear that he's benchable. Um, but yeah, I think that he's played well enough and he's fit enough. There's not really reason to ignore Darwin right now. More so than let's say Jota and Diaz. But I wouldn't be super confident about like Darwin's minutes. Like I wouldn't say like he's set for. two sort of long-standing minute starts. Like he could very well
Mm.
play like, I don't know, 75 minutes one game and maybe like 80 another, depending on, let's say, whether Salah's ready to like come in for the Brentford game and play sub minutes, and Gakpo as well. So that will take away minutes from two players, bare minimum. But of course, if Salah's not part of the squad, like then you have to change your mind. And of course, we're going to get a Liverpool league most likely, because they're probably one of the few teams in the league where you actually get considerable leagues along with City as well, which is very fortunate
Mm.
for some managers.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that the punt as well, like when you're punting into attackers, it's not so bad as punting into defenders, because I think our
Yeah.
issue, of course, is that we think the defender benching will happen versus Luton. So you're not going to get a league for that. So whatever league you get for, let's say, the first Liverpool game is probably always going to be more beneficial towards bringing in an attacker, right? Because hopefully, provided you get some Salah related information, you don't run the risk of, let's say, ruining a Luton clean sheet by just not even having a player start for that Luton game. So I think it's always nicer if you have, let's say, an attacker coming off the bench than, let's say, a defender, because you just feel like that's a completely spoilt game from the beginning if you're coming off the bench. So that's the only thing I'd say. I think, yeah, if you got a leak and the best guess, I'd still, for example, choose to make a Liverpool midfield transfer outside of Van Dijk, if I was punting, or Darwin, of course, and I would prefer Darwin first. So myself, someone who's basically going to be dead ending with Liverpool, I'll be going for Jota or Diaz, depending on, let's say, whatever league we get on Gameweek 25.
Yeah, fair enough. I think those are the sort of best or near best options that we have
Yeah,
for this game
we
week.
can go through chat
And
questions maybe.
yeah, so the final topic, of course, as usual, is captaincy. And I, this isn't a question of who you are captain, whom you are captaining. It's a question of are you triple captaining
Fair
said
enough.
person.
Yeah,
And of course, it's Erling Haaland. That's why we don't have a separate graphic this week for
yeah.
captaincy, because uh, whatever you want to take away from, unfortunately, is Nan passing away. If you know that he's going to start, which I know it's a 12:30 game, I think. So it's, oh, sorry, it's
That's the Liverpool
12:30
game.
here,
Yeah,
which is like 5:30. No, 12:30
yeah.
is EST. So it's, I think, the 5 o'clock or 5:30 game, which means there's less chance of a leak, but also we still could easily have a leak, right? About if he is going to play that game. Unfortunately, they don't travel anywhere, so there isn't the aspect of has he traveled with the squad or anything like that, because the both games are at home. So hopefully we get an inkling of if he starts, and if he. So what is your plan? Let's say we don't get any kind of information. Are you still going ahead with the triple captaincy?
You mean like if let's say Pep gives a press conference and doesn't talk about
Yeah,
Haaland's
he doesn't
situation,
talk, which
or let's
is
say
very
he
likely,
says
right?
it's up in the air,
Everyone is available, which is what he says a lot of times.
I think I'll triple captain Haaland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Yeah.
I mean, like, so this happened to Rodri as well, right? He played almost instantly. I mean, like, I'm gonna have to hope that Pep gives us information if there's information to be gained. I still think
Mm.
this is a perfect chance to go Haaland. I'm not gonna suddenly change my captaincy. I still think this is a very good triple captaincy week as well. Bear in mind, I know Solanke's sort of waiting for us in Game Week 28, and a lot of us aren't going to bench boost 28. So maybe, of course, if let's say Haaland, if there's any doubt to Haaland, I think you just switch your idea, like the idea of triple captaincy, to Solanke, right?
Mm.
Because you can't guarantee the same sort of minutes for any of the City players. Maybe you think that Haaland coming out sort of enhances maybe KDB's minutes. Maybe triple captain KDB makes sense. Could be the case. But I don't really think I would change my mind unless, like, let's say Pep actually throws in doubt. If he doesn't throw in doubt, then I think I'll just triple captain Haaland as it is. Yeah,
Absolutely, I'm with you there. And it could easily go as badly as it did last season, but we will take the expected value and nothing else. That always serves as copium if even if we don't get the actual points.
that's fair.
So yeah. So do we want to read the chat? I guess we
Yeah,
sort of
absolutely. We might have
interacted
skipped a,
live
a
with the
couple of
chat,
things, but we,
but
we can start from the top, I'd say. I'll just go through the questions
yeah.
so that we don't get confused. So a little bit of Andy Martin discussion, of course, which we went through at the time. C Hunt says he doesn't have a keeper in 29, which I think is. I mean, I think whenever you don't have a keeper or there's a double game week for a keeper, I think it's always worth it to sort of make that transfer for a goalkeeper. Then I think
Hmm.
the expected value for a keeper whenever there's an actual fixture or a double game week fixture is always, it's erratic, but it's actually always consistent, lately quite good. So always almost worth the hit, for example, to bring a double game week keeper where possible. So I would definitely go for it. Flapjack says up the FPL script. So, and that's from the boardroom. Um, and Sean Jackson says up the ding. Okay, but
So,
serious
do
questions
we
though.
have any
Andy Martin on
questions?
script. Do you want to answer that one? In the summer, he says.
Yeah, I already, yeah, in
Yeah,
the summer, we are more than happy to host
yeah,
because that's a time when we can actually have some guest episodes.
yeah,
I know that last season we took a break, and we will obviously take some kind of a break, but if we plan on doing some content, yeah, we will definitely invite a lot of managers we think are entertaining and worth talking to.
yeah.
So
No, I
yeah, we'll
agree.
definitely keep Andy in mind.
Yeah,
Um, Robert time we already discussed Robertson. Uh, oh, I think you can probably answer the one about Wildcard 26.
mm,
Will it be that bad if Arsenal Chelsea is still on? You'll have six if you plan for free hit 29 anyway. Yeah, I think you covered that, right? Because
yeah.
you said that
I'd rather
free hit
plan for free at
29.
29 because that
Yeah,
just means
yeah,
that I'm like actually betting that there would be upsets.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then I can just change my strategy to 3 at 34 just like on a dime. And I'll have enough
But
transfers between
also,
them. Yeah.
if a lot of upsets happen,
Mm-hmm.
that means a lot of the fixtures will take place, which
Yeah.
means that most teams won't need to free hit in 29, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So as in the thing is if I plan for free at 29 and the fixtures
Yeah.
that I'm not expecting to happen do happen, then I'm happy with the players that I have because it's
Yeah,
like
fair enough. Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
only exception would be that I would be probably maybe better served to let's say not have excuse me well actually no it's fine because I think United would play let's say Sheffield United, Wolves would play Bournemouth at home. Like these are amazing fixtures. So all the players that I would be punting on, quote unquote, have amazing fixtures. So that's why I
Hmm.
kind of like the punt of planning for free at 29 because I would get
Hmm.
those Wolves and Man United players anyways. And if those fixtures happen, like that's still a really good fixture for me. So I'll take that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are
Fair
kind of
enough.
my thoughts on that. And as you can
Yeah.
see, I'm not deeply invested into like Bournemouth or Luton as well. So
No,
when it
no,
comes to
no.
Game Week 29, my team will be perfectly insulated, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Priyan says wildcard 26, bench boost 28. I don't think you are
I
bench
can't do it.
boosting
I
in
can't do it.
28. So uh, I agree on Andy Martin says I agree on no City and Liverpool. Come 31, though I feel you'll suddenly be behind. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that.
31 I think starts with the City fixture, right? So then it's like City, and then
Hmm.
it's Crystal Palace away, which is actually like
Yeah.
your classic bogey fixture, blah blah blah. But I mean, uh, look, I should have enough transfers where if I need more City players, I'll get that. I definitely will be booking. I don't think I really. I mean, look, with City players, I think the question mark is more over like if Foden is someone who can maintain his minutes. Like the question I suppose is it worth like dropping him at all? I have some value shed over him. Maybe I can
Hmm.
consider keeping him. With the City defenders and even like Ederson, for example, like I've just got no interest because I do think that their minutes can kind of fluctuate quite a bit. And with Walker, I mean, I'm not going to say he's got fake expected value. That's just BS. But yeah, ultimately, I think the only concern I'd really have would be in losing Foden. So I'll definitely think about it a little bit, but I don't think the fixtures are amazing. And also, if I was to keep a 1 million structure within, let's say, an 8 attacker draft, I think the only thing I would do is probably swap my premiums around, which would still mean that I prefer, for example, like going for Salah so I can get like Sheffield United at home, for example, over what City
Which is the
have.
30 game week 30 game, right?
I think it's the 31 fixture.
Oh, 31.
But
Sorry,
yeah,
31. Yeah.
we would be
Yeah.
bringing in Salah versus Brighton as opposed to going for let's say a City player versus Arsenal.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, that would be sort of the strategy in play.
Yeah, fair. Priyan says best goalkeeper combo if you're planning for bench boost 37 on wildcard 26.
I don't
I
think
think you
there's
talked
a
about
perfect
Leno,
answer. I did,
but
yeah.
yeah,
There's Leno. He does have an awful double game week on the
yeah,
cards, but
yeah.
I think what I'll do is probably still just pick the goalkeeper variant. That's like I think I'm prepared to take a hit for a goalkeeper on game week 37 because it's very likely that none of the keepers that I can get now that have a double game week like almost semi confirmed for game week 37 are going to be good. So why not just go with like a short term pair that gives me as much expected value? Then when 37 comes around, I just take a hit and then dead end for the season and call it a day with my bench boost.
Anthony says thoughts on the review pushing for Dubravka to Allison as part of a hit. So
I like it.
because I did Dubravka to Allison last game week, obviously I do
You
like that
don't.
move.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I
because
really
this
like
week,
it.
yeah, exactly, and also you do save a spot, a blank spot,
Yeah.
essentially if you do have Areola. So I would suggest if you try with some chip combinations as well. that will give you a better idea. If Ryu keeps pushing the same move on you, that means that that move has to be done regardless of, it's a chip agnostic move. So
Yeah.
that could help you out.
It's a longer term move too, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
so much more preferential to like going for a Liverpool player that's going to be, dealing with really high xMins uncertainty within like the next few weeks.
Hmm.
Like as soon as that
Hmm.
rotation sets in, I think they have a very strong squad right now in terms of how deep it is. Like maybe barring the midfield, because there's obviously a couple of injuries, but like in terms of the positions that we want FPL players, I think there's quite a bit of depth for Liverpool right now, which is a bit scary. Like in terms of
Yes.
owning and investing into assets outside of Allison. And Virgil van Dijk is honestly very costly for what he is as a defender,
Hmm.
right? Like when you look at Saliba and the value that he brings to the table, you don't really want Virgil like permanently, I would say. Like Virgil feels like more of a short-term pick, and because he's expensive. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, sorry, I was. If you want to cover
Oh no, it's
some of
fine. You
the
can keep going.
remaining, yeah. Oh, okay.
I was enjoying that
Uh,
rhythm.
nice. Okay, sorry. I'm assuming there's no point rolling this week if you are wildcard next game week.
Yeah, absolutely not. I
Yeah.
mean, like if you
Yeah.
think you've got a free hit team, like fair enough. I mean, that's a huge flex.
Yeah.
But if you've got any chance of getting a little bit of upside with one transfer, make that transfer.
Yeah.
Unless
Absolutely.
as I said, you have a free hit team and you want to save that transfer so you can get better rank with less transfers. So yeah,
Yeah. Uh, Priyan says if you're not on wildcard 26, you probably need the city defender to turn up for your team in 26 at least.
I agree
Exactly.
with that 100%. Yeah,
Yes.
because that's the
Yes.
value of
So
City.
my concern is I want to bring in a city defender, and I'm exactly in that awkward spot where do I think they start against Bournemouth?
Yeah,
Because so I've actually come around, even if they get benched for one game week out of two in 25, I'm
right.
okay with it as long as they play in 26.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah, because I assume they get on the pitch and get at least 1 point
that's
and
true.
some expected value.
Is there any way you can benefit from that though? Like, what would be the play here? Or do you
As
think
in,
any keepers like, or so do you think any defender is like more likely to, I guess, fall into that situation?
oh, I think Ake could easily have one rest,
Okay.
which could easily be one game week out of one game out of the two in 25. It's not of course set in stone because he's played what 890s in a row and also one Champions League 90-minute game now. So he's played a lot of minutes consistently.
Yeah.
But because they don't have a lot of options, people are suggesting that he'll continue to play, which I hope is the case. But also, it wouldn't surprise me if he's benched. I would say that Walker is still probably the better option given historical minutes. I know suddenly he's been benched twice, so I guess there is some uncertainty when it comes to Walker as well.
Mm.
But okay, so I think more encouraging stuff for Walker is the fact that he got on for what around 40 minutes, right, in the last game, around 40 minutes
Yeah, because he was
when he
needed
was
because they
confirmed.
wanted to push. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if that happens, you know that Walker is one of the first ones who will come on.
That's
So
yeah.
I
So
guess
a first choice player. So I guess
exactly.
Maybe Diaz is one of those players we'd probably think
Oh,
is also in
Diaz, I
that
would
camp.
say that he could miss out. Would you not
Hmm.
say?
On
If they
26. Oh,
no
because
no
you think he plays
uh,
back to back. Okay.
if he, let's say, is to miss one of the games, would you say
Yeah.
that Diaz is the least
I
likely
think Diaz
to
is the
come
most
come
likely
on
to
as
be
a
a
sub?
90 or 0 player, if that makes
Agreed.
sense. Yeah. So
Agreed.
that's your
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Perfect. Uh,
which is
Review
nice
has
too, though, right? Isn't that technically like, let's say he gets benched on 26, is that you might not have a player to replace him with,
yeah.
but yeah, why not? Yeah,
Wow. Yeah. FPL Mess's review has Bradley as Trent replacement.
which I
I think
think
it
is fair.
completely depends on minutes, right?
Yeah,
How many minutes you
as
set
in well, the thing is,
and
I
who's playing.
think as I was kind of saying, like some people have to sort of go to Bradley because it might enable a better move in a sense, like something that might give you a bit more upshot. Like I feel like, for example, let's say if you can afford De Bruyne suddenly, like that's the type of move where I'd say, okay, I think Bradley actually makes sense because you're probably guaranteed to start. And like we said, in the City situation, you'd probably get decent minutes in the next game. And I think Bradley's definitely like the first choice right back that's not Trent Alexander-Arnold. And you never know like how this Trent Alexander-Arnold injury will develop. Like, not to mention that obviously this is a player who's sort of suffered a reoccurrence of an injury. It's more likely that he will actually be even more managed, right? Like coming back
Hmm.
into fitness, which is why I've been telling people who own Trent, like, if you can go Virgil, just go Virgil. Because I think rolling with
Yeah.
Trent,
Yeah.
will cause some structural issues with your team, like for the next few weeks, because this is not going to be a short-term thing for Trent. I think it will probably take a while for him to get back to rolling good minutes, and probably Bradley would be the one to benefit the most from it in the short term. And then
Yeah.
you can kind of like sack him off, or you just treat him as like one of your dead weight players. Like there's not many people in the game who are 4.1 who, could have insane value in certain weeks, and Bradley really could be that. So I do like Bradley generally speaking. I don't think he's that bad in terms of how it could break your team, because it's very unlikely that you're going to go triple Liverpool, in my opinion, going forwards. Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, I think most managers are going to be transferring out those Liverpool players immediately in Game26, because you're probably going to prefer keeping your Spurs players instead. That's sort of my assumption.
Yes, and for even for my team, the transfers are being suggested for a -4 is to transfer out both Darwin and Jota if I bring
Mm,
Darwin in.
okay.
So it's such a short-term move bringing in Liverpool players right now
Yeah.
from an EV perspective that I completely agree. If at least Bradley could become a dead spot on your team, that's actually a fair point.
Yeah.
Next question by K7 is who is more urgent to get Jota or KDB? You've missed the Burnley game, so I would say KDB. Now, I would have said Jota maybe last week because you get three great games.
Yes. It's a
But
good
now
point.
the fact that Jota does not play
And
in 26
Salah's timeline feels. Do you think it's
and
fast, like better than expected? It was better than what I expected,
oh,
I guess.
100%.
Yeah.
I sold him last week. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now the other thing is I would have had to sell him, which meant that I
Anyways, right.
don't understand why I held on to him. That just
Fair.
invalidated the whole
Fair.
thing of
Fair.
holding on to him.
Yeah.
Because all solves where I even put Salah's minutes at 90 for the double, they still want review still wanted me to sell him, which is
Wow.
crazy. So
Okay.
there was actually no reason to hold on to him. It's just I continuously was dealing with other fires, I
Issues.
guess,
Yeah.
in the team. So it really is it's a debacle. And I think when we get to season review at the end of the season, I might look at that as one of the mistakes that I probably made this season. But let's not get too grim right now. Muhammad Akram says, "Are you recommend? Do you recommend Trent to Ake if my team template exactly same like your
I
team, Fran?"
I
Yes,
think Ake would be the defender I
I
go
think.
with, personally. But I can understand going for Diaz as well.
Hmm. So Priyansh's point is, and this is the final sort of message. The
Yeah.
issue is that Ruben didn't play versus Bournemouth in the reverse fixture, and that's actually a fair point because we have seen certain types of defenders playing against certain teams.
Yeah.
When it comes to
I think
Pep
Stones was there at the
fielding
time as well,
11,
if I
yeah,
remember. Yeah.
yes, he was. So, which is again the case, right? So that's why we are thinking that Diaz is definitely, Ruben is definitely a 90 or 0 player,
Mm,
which could easily come back to haunt you because you might get two 90s in the double, which is perfect. You get massive empty boost.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it all comes crashing down when he gets no minutes against Bournemouth,
I've actually
when you
always
really
thought
want him.
about this just as a general thought experiment, because review always has Man City players at like 75 minutes. It doesn't really dare to go above that. Maybe I
Hmm.
guess bar a short period before UCL where we had Walker and Stones at a moment. Um, but for people who actually go into Man City defenders, like I think your mins MD must be always higher than your xMins MD as long as you get
Yes.
your calls right, because like there's so much EV being neglected there. With Ruben, obviously it's so interesting because he is a 19-0 player almost. But yeah, I think it's a tough one, isn't it? Like I'd probably go with Ake. I think that Pep is definitely one of the few managers who's like very specific about how he sets up for certain teams.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it is a bit concerning, I guess, that he didn't face Bournemouth in the reverse fixture. But
And I
can
also
you
think
expect
he
Stones to
loves.
play? I don't know. It's hard to say.
No, I also think he loves certain narratives because Ake seems to play every time against Bournemouth. Every
Right.
time.
Yeah.
I don't remember a time when he hasn't played against Bournemouth when he's been fit. And it could be a pure coincidence, which is
Yeah.
a small likelihood. But also, it just seems like in the plethora of opponents, he does seem to be the perfect fit to play against Bournemouth. So, working back from the assumption that Ake plays Bournemouth, that's why I was saying that there could be a small chance that
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
gets arrested in one of the double game
Yeah.
week
Which you'd
games.
prefer, I
So
think, in the end, if you can get one
yes,
star in 25. Yeah.
I would definitely prefer that. Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. VC has a
Yeah.
question.
Okay, I think that's the last question. We
Right.
will end the pod there. I have VC says I have Salah still. What is the best I can do from Gameweek 25 now?
I would say
I think you
wait
keep
for a
him, right?
leak. I would keep him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I guess the question is, do you have Holland? I mean, you probably can't triple captain Salah, if I'm honest. I think it's hard
No,
to,
you
unless
can't.
we get
No,
some sort of
yeah.
crazy news that he starts, which is so unexpected. But yeah, I would keep
But
Salah.
do you think he plays the next game though? That's the question. Even if he does start this game, it just seem
I know,
very
but if you
unlikely.
get a Salah start, I think that's already like insane value, I guess.
That's fair. That's
And
fair.
I think
Fair.
because he'll definitely be coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Like it's almost a guarantee, I feel. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I'd probably keep Salah. Obviously, that does probably hamper your ability to manage Game Week 26 because I think like the nice side of Holland is, you're basically getting your premium playing on 26, right? Such a tough fixture. Um, yeah, and that's what I think we also missed a question. Someone said that he wants to wild card on Game Week 25, but no one's going for a wild card. I think the simple reality is if you look at the fixtures, um, the only way a wildcard 25 would work in my mind, and I've actually thought about it just because I make content for people who aren't necessarily on the same path as me. But wildcard 25, I think the best thing you could probably do is free hit 29, because if you wildcard 25 and then you plan to free hit 34, you'd probably have to book in an instantaneous hit, just because you'd struggle to have a goalkeeper. Um, and you probably have to take a hit for two Liverpool players, because I think to maximize the short term value, you want to go Virgil, Darwin,
For Liverpool,
probably,
yeah.
and someone else. Like it might have to be a Liverpool defender even, or you go
Allison, I think.
Allison, but
Yeah.
Allison kind
Yeah.
of hurts. Allison kind of hurts you because you'd have to go for a Gaming 26 keeper as well, and that probably prevents your ability to go Neto, right? So you want to have Neto because he's a guaranteed Game Week 28 double Game Week keeper. And if you go Neto plus Allison, you have to take a hit, in my opinion. And you
So you
you
can do
might
Kaminsky, right?
you could go, but then Kaminsky would also blank in Game Week 26. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's a fair
I've
point. I forgot about
it's
that. Yeah.
it's 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 tough.
Yeah,
I
it's
think it's
still
very
Kaminsky.
conflicted,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
have had to look into it. I would wildcard 25 with the idea of free hitting on 29. That should allow you to go Darwin to Watkins. You should create a squad, and I'll make a TikTok about it so you can watch that video. Let's just
Nice.
do that.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
I think that's that for this episode.
absolutely.
Thank you everyone for joining. We
We have a
definitely
lot of
have
viewers,
a
by the
lot
way, so
more.
please subscribe. Just
Exactly.
want to jump in there.
Yeah.
Please subscribe.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
really
yeah,
would really
absolutely.
help
Please
support the
subscribe.
podcast.
Really great to have Andy Martin, Flapjack,
Yeah,
Priyansh, and the likes
some
today.
esteemed
You know,
members
we
here,
always
and Mira as well,
absolutely.
and
And
C
yeah,
Hunt,
absolutely.
a legend
Yeah, yeah.
of the
C
channel.
Hunt,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hunt is an absolute legend.
and
So,
all the other legends as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining. Hope you enjoyed this episode. As Fran already pointed out, please subscribe. This podcast will go out on Friday on all podcast platforms. So please give it 5 stars and share it. And we'll see you next week. Hopefully, I don't know when we will stream next week because
Oh,
the
right, because
game
we have
week
a double game
ends
week. We might have to react
exactly,
immediately when the double game week ends.
exactly. So
So
we might be
podcast
looking at
only if I get a green arrow. I'm kidding. Yeah,
I think we will. So hopefully, the hit for me
that's
will
too
pay off,
confident. Yeah.
and